Hey, it's October and we're in the corn and we're gonna play ChatGPT roulette. Here we go. Okay, what do we have here? Unexpected mentors, lost in translation, hidden talents, a brush with fame. If I could talk to my younger self, yeah, this is something I've thought about a lot. It reminds me a bit of the miniseries Dark. Dark is a German miniseries that's on Netflix, and it involves time travel and it involves people meeting up with their younger and older selves. And it's a strange concept, but it's one that I have given a lot of thought to. What would I do if I could talk to my younger self? It would be very strange, because that would also mean my younger self would encounter my older self. And it didn't happen. So if it actually did happen, I would be remembering it now, and I don't. So I don't think it happened. No, it didn't. But if it happened, if I could go back and talk to my younger self, what advice would I give? Definitely I would give some advice. Well, there's so much. One of the things though is that you don't want to steer your younger self from making mistakes necessarily. Maybe big mistakes, but not all mistakes, because mistakes are important and failures are important, because you learn from mistakes and failures. So I wouldn't try to head off every problem that my younger self had, but there's a few things I would do. Let me think. What would be entertaining? Okay, I have three things. I would tell my younger self about bre-x. bre-x was a penny stock in the early to mid 1990s that blew up and then went to zero. I would tell my younger self about Bitcoin, and I would also have some advice about YouTube. So let's unpack those things. bre-x. So bre-x was this gold mining stock that was selling for about 30 cents a share in around 93 or 94. And they had a gold discovery in Indonesia, I believe, and it was a gigantic discovery, and it was in the news, and the stock rocketed to like 285 Canadian dollars by, I think, 1996, if I have this right. And in 1996, it was discovered, 96 or 97, it was discovered that this huge gold discovery was a fraud. And in fact, what had happened is core samples had been taken from the location where the mining site was in Indonesia, and it had been salted with gold. So actually, there was either no gold or very little gold at this site, and the stock plummeted from $285 Canadian or whatever it was down to nothing overnight. So here's what I would tell my younger self to do. Buy bre-x, B-R-E-X. Buy it at 30 cents, or buy as much as you can afford at 30 cents. And when it gets to be above $250 Canadian, sell it all. When it gets to be above 280, short as much as you can. And then when it drops, when the news breaks and it's a terrible stock and everyone realizes this, then you close your short position. That's what I would do. So that's bre-x. The next one was Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is interesting, so I'm not going to give the history of Bitcoin, but I will say this. My theory on who the inventor of Bitcoin was, he's known as Satoshi Nakamoto. I think that's him, Satoshi Nakamoto, or something like that. Satoshi, everyone calls him Satoshi. I believe that was Hal Finney. Hal Finney, I believe, was a person very early on, an engineer, I think, who worked on Bitcoin very, very early on. He unfortunately died back in around, I don't know when it was, 2010, 2011, 2012, something like that. So the advice I would give to him if I could meet up with Hal Finney before he died is I would tell him, give your spouse and family your private keys for your Bitcoin wallets, because there are billions of dollars sitting in Bitcoin that we believe will never be recovered, because whoever Satoshi is, and I think it's Hal Finney, he died with those keys, and those keys are gone. Now, back to my younger self. Here's what I would tell my younger self. Well, let me give you some history first. In around 2010, I heard of Bitcoin. It was in the news, and I was interested in it, and I looked at it. And you could mine Bitcoin with a CPU in those days. Now you need a GPU. You have to have graphics cards or ASICs, special miners. But in around 2010, you could mine with a regular computer with a CPU. And I experimented with this in around then, and I mined it for a little while. I didn't actually, I wasn't part of a pool, and I didn't actually get any Bitcoin, I don't think. And I kind of thought, oh, this is crazy. So I gave up, and I didn't pursue it. I later got back into crypto in around 2017, in the spring of 2017, and I'm still in it. But if I could go back and tell my younger self, my 2010 self, I would say, get as much Bitcoin as you can. Don't necessarily mine it, but buy it. And I think the exchange would be Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox was involved in a big theft, and I think there was a big scandal around Mt. Gox. It was an early Bitcoin exchange or crypto exchange where you could buy Bitcoin. So that's what I would advise my younger self to do. Get as much Bitcoin as you can in 2010 and sell it when it gets to $60,000. And you're gonna have to wait until, when did it go to 60? The early 20s anyway, 2020, 21, 22, something like that. The final thing is YouTube. I've been interested in YouTube for some time, but I didn't really get serious about making videos for YouTube until the last couple of years, so 2022, 2023, and around that time frame. And even as a kid, I was really interested in photography and audio, making audio recordings. I was really interested in that. And I would have been into video, but this was the 1970s, 1980s, and video just was not a thing that was readily accessible to a 12-year-old. So I would tell my younger self, maybe myself from the 2000s, I would say, get into this thing called YouTube. Make YouTube videos, make channels, get creative, because the people who got into YouTube early, you could become successful and it could be a living, and I would have loved to do this kind of thing for a living. The creativity involved and the medium is amazing, and I would have loved to be part of that early on. Now I'm still hoping I can be. I'm trying, but it's a lot harder now. Yeah, so I would tell my younger self about bre-x, Bitcoin, and get into YouTube.